My point is that this kind of tolerance actually ends up in a contradiction. It ends up contradicting itself. And oddly enough, most of the people who use the word tolerance, they don't even realize they're contradicting themselves. They don't even see the contradiction. But there are a few. There are a few people who actually see the contradiction, like Michael Mendes. And he writes for the organization Big Think. They do videos, like educational videos online. How many have seen the Big Think videos? A few of you. They do videos that are kind of like these short little educational videos. Well, those of you who've watched the Big Think videos, you may want to rethink the credibility of Big Think after you see this. But here's what he wrote. He said, quote, if somebody is preaching or practicing intolerance, the tolerant person cannot in principle speak out against what the intolerant person is doing, since speaking out against intolerance would itself be an act of intolerance. Now first, notice that this is the modern definition of tolerance through and through. This is a great representation of the modern definition of intolerance. He's saying in order to be tolerant, you can't even speak out against another view. Simply disagreeing with someone is intolerant. But he goes on to acknowledge the contradiction. He sees the contradiction. He says, quote, the principle of tolerance requires us to grant intolerant people the right to be intolerant. This is clearly self-contradictory. That's what he says. This is clearly self-contradictory. Tolerance as a principle, then, is clearly illogical and therefore irrational. He calls his own view illogical and irrational. So how does he resolve the irrationality of his view? He doesn't. He goes on to say that we should yield to our irrational side and embrace tolerance. So he just embraces the contradiction. In fact, there are a lot of words that we use in our society, especially when issues relating to tolerance come up, that we give self-contradictory definitions. A lot of words that we use in a self-contradictory sort of way around discussions of tolerance. For example, think about how Wilson Cruz from GLAAD used the word discrimination. Remember, he said he was praising A&E for suspending Phil Robertson, and he called that a stand against discrimination. But think about it, when A&E suspended Phil Robertson, weren't they discriminating against Phil Robertson based on his moral views? You see, they're doing the very same thing. So Phil Robertson's views certainly were not being treated as equally valid. That's for sure. So, and then another word that often comes up in these discussions is the word judging. But Marty's going to cover that next, so he's going to help me out there, so I don't need to go into that one. But there are a lot of words that we use in our society in a self-contradictory way, especially around these moral issues when we talk about being tolerant. But what this shows is that when we define the word tolerance, or the word discrimination, or even the word judging, as you will see, in a self-contradictory way, you can't actually live it out. If you define tolerance in a self-contradictory way, you can't actually live it out. We can talk as if all views are equally valid, but you can't actually live that way. Even the most tolerant person doesn't tolerate intolerance. I'll say that again because it's a little confusing. Even the most tolerant person doesn't tolerate intolerance. And that's why the shirts that we have in the lobby, that's why they say some of the most intolerant people are those who promote tolerance. You see, in promoting this type of tolerance, you end up practicing intolerance. By promoting this type of tolerance, you end up practicing intolerance. You can't actually live it out. The second problem with this modern definition of tolerance is that it undermines open-mindedness and respect. It undermines open-mindedness and respect. You see, if all views are equally valid, well then, that means my view is automatically valid. If all views are equally valid, then my view is automatically valid. You have your views that are right for you, and that's valid for you, but this is right for me. So my view is automatically right. That means there's no way that you could be wrong. There's no way I could be wrong. So that means there's no reason for me to be humble about my view, because I already know that I'm right, and there's no reason to be open to other people's views. Other people's views may be right for them, but that's not right for me. So there's no reason to be open to other people's point of view. You already know that you're right. So that's why many of the people who promote this type of tolerance actually end up being so close-minded. Well, there's a better way. It turns out that there's a better way. Instead, we could hold to the original definition of tolerance. The original definition of tolerance. Here's the classic definition of tolerance. Treat all people as equal in value and in dignity, while acknowledging that some ideas, some views, and some lifestyles are better than others. Now, do you know what this is called? We have a word for this in our society. We just don't call it tolerance. This is called just plain being civil and being respectful. That's what classic tolerance is, being civil and being respectful. So those with whom we disagree have just as much right to be heard and treated with civility. And so as a result, this results in respect, this results in open-mindedness, and this results in listening to one another. And really, in the Christian worldview, this type of tolerance makes all the sense in the world. Under a Christian worldview, this type of tolerance makes so much sense because according to the Bible, all people are made by God and bear his image. So every person is of infinite worth, infinite value. And so as Christians, also, we should be humble about our views because of all people, we should realize that we are just as flawed and fallible as everyone else. Doesn't mean that we think our views are wrong. Doesn't mean we won't try to convince other people that we've got it right, but we're open to being shown that we're wrong. We're open to what other people have to say because we realize that we're just as flawed and fallible as everyone else. So under the classic definition of tolerance, we treat all people as equal, but we don't treat all ideas as equal. Some ideas are better than others. I think deep down we know this, right? I think we all know that some ideas are better than others. In fact, let me give you an example. If your dog is soaking wet and you want to dry him off, you could use a towel, or you could use the microwave. Now, are those two ideas equal? No! Using the microwave is a bad idea. Trust me, I tried it. No. I used the oven. Anyway, bad example. Okay, what about this example? What if you're stuck outside during a lightning storm? Now, you have a few different options, but two major options are you can get low to the ground in an open field, or you can stand under a tree. Now, are those two ideas equal? No. One of those is a bad idea. And if you don't know which one of those is a bad idea, please just don't ever go outside ever again, please. But my point is that there are bad ideas. I think we all know this. There are bad ideas. So this type of tolerance, though, doesn't suffer from the contradictions of the modern definition because we acknowledge that there are bad ideas, that not all ideas are equal. But there's another reason to adopt the classic definition of tolerance. And it's a good one. In fact, it's a really good one. In fact, this is worth the whole price of admission. So if the person sitting next to you is asleep, just go ahead and flick their ear or something. Yeah, there we go. Good. Don't tell them it was me. Okay. Anyway, it wasn't my idea. But anyway, okay, so think about this. Under the classic definition of tolerance, it's okay to disagree, right? Because not all ideas are equal. It's okay to disagree. But under the modern definition of tolerance, you cannot disagree. That's why Michael Mendes was saying you can't even speak out against another view. Simply disagreeing with someone is itself intolerant. But think about it. Tolerance requires disagreement. Tolerance requires disagreement. If you already agree with someone, you're not tolerating them, you're agreeing, right? So if you agree with someone, you're not tolerating, if two people agree, they're not tolerating each other, they're agreeing with each other. I'll give you an example. In the place that I used to work, we used to take turns picking the music. So each day we'd switch off who gets to pick the music that we'd listen to for that day. And so, when it was my turn, I picked a variety of different types of music. Let's see how many people are kind of in the same boat here with me. How many people like the band Switchfoot? How many of you like Switchfoot? Okay, quite a few of you. Okay, how many of you like classic, like funk? Good old classic funk music. Okay, a few. We've got a few bass players or drummers there. Okay. How many of you like classic jazz, like acoustic jazz, kind of Miles Davis? Okay. Of course, I was a teenager in the 90s. So how many people like 90s alternative and grunge? I'd throw in a little bit of that. And a little bit of reggae. You don't want to go overboard with reggae. You can't listen to it all day. But yeah, it's kind of fun to throw in some reggae. All right. But sometimes it was Dave's turn to pick the music. And Dave, for some reason, loved this XM radio station that was all adult contemporary. How many people like adult contemporary? Okay, you can leave. No, just kidding. No, that's cool. But he wanted to listen to adult contemporary. I got to tell you, when it was his turn to pick the music, I really struggled with atheism. How could a loving God allow that kind of... Sorry. No, that's a little inappropriate. But anyway, he would just pick this XM radio station that was all adult contemporary. Now, when it was his turn to pick the music, did I, throw his speakers out the window? No, I didn't, just in case you were wondering. Did I sabotage the building's electrical panel so we lost power so I didn't have to listen to his music? Only once. But no, I didn't do that. Did I tell him he can't play his music? No. I sat there and I tolerated it. Now, it doesn't mean that I pretended to like it. In fact, that doesn't mean that I didn't try to convince him that there's better music out there. But, it didn't work, by the way. But that I didn't try to force him to stop playing his music. I didn't tell him to stop playing the music. Now, what if one morning I come in, it's his turn to pick the music, and he picks Switchfoot? Now, can I say, man, I'm really tolerant. I've been tolerating Switchfoot all day. Can I say that? No, because I already agree. You can't tolerate something you already agree with. And it's the same with people's views and ideas. I can't tolerate someone who agrees with me because there's nothing to tolerate. We agree. So, just to give an example, if the LGBT community, for example, wants us to be tolerant toward them, then we have to disagree with them. If they want us to agree, that's not tolerance, that's agreement. So you have to disagree in order to be tolerant. The word tolerance doesn't even make sense if it already includes agreement. So it has to include disagreement. And really, the classic definition of tolerance takes that into account. So in light of this distinction, the distinction between the modern definition of tolerance and the classic definition of tolerance, how do we actually use this material in our day-to-day lives? Well, the first thing we can do is we can practice classic tolerance. Practice classic tolerance. So when someone disagrees with you, when you disagree with someone else, be respectful. Be respectful. Treat them like the valuable human being that they are. Another way that we can practice classic tolerance is we can also give other people the opportunity to express their point of view, even if it disagrees with ours. Give other people the opportunity to express their point of view. So a great way to do this is to draw people out, start conversations. And a great way to start conversations is to ask questions. Great way to start conversations is to ask questions. So you could ask these two very simple questions. What do you believe? And why do you believe it? What do you believe? And why do you believe it? Find out what people believe. Have them describe their own view in their own words, and then ask them why they believe it. It's a great way to start conversations. Also, another way that we can use this in our day-to-day lives is don't be afraid to live out and express biblical worldview, a biblical view. Live like a Christian. And if someone accuses you of being intolerant, just simply for living as a Christian, well, then you can ask them, this is a great opportunity to tell them about true tolerance. If someone accuses you of being intolerant for just living as a Christian, well, this is a great opportunity to tell them about true tolerance. But don't start lecturing them, well, like I'm doing to you right now, unless they face all their chairs toward you and give you a microphone. Then you can probably lecture them. But a better way to point this out, what true tolerance is to ask questions again. Again, to ask questions. So if someone says, you're intolerant, or you should be more tolerant, or if they call someone else intolerant, well, this is a great opportunity to ask them, what do you mean by intolerant? Have them define intolerance. Now they have to give a definition. And if they define tolerance as anything like, well, you are intolerant because you disagree with me, well, then you can point out, well, aren't you disagreeing with me? So by your own definition, wouldn't that make you intolerant also? So you're helping them see the contradiction in their view. If they say that you are intolerant for disagreeing with them, well, they just now disagreed with you, so they're being intolerant under that same standard. So you're helping them see the contradiction in their definition, and then you can point them to true tolerance. Point them to true tolerance. Last, I want to to encourage you guys to rise above tolerance. Rise above tolerance. Now, I know I just finished saying that we should be tolerant, and that's true. That's true. That's a good place to start. But we shouldn't stop there. We should be trying to do better than tolerance. That's what Jesus taught. You see, tolerance wasn't good enough for Jesus. He taught his followers to rise above tolerance. Don't just tolerate the people with whom you disagree, but love them. In Luke chapter 6, verses 27 through 28, Jesus said, "Love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you." Today, you learned what true tolerance is. So now, you can rise above it. So thank you guys for listening.